So while Donald Trump was busy rage tweeting about Canada being the 51st state and threatening 25% tariffs like some kind of deranged economic arsonist, Mark Carney just pulled off what might be the most brilliant geopolitical chess move of the decade. And Trump didn't even see it coming. Here's what happened. Just hours ago, reports broke that Canada has finalized a comprehensive trade framework with the European Union that essentially creates a fortress against American economic bullying. We're talking about a deal that prioritizes Canadian-European trade corridors, energy partnerships, and critical mineral agreements that completely bypass the United States. And the timing? Chef's kiss. Because this happened literally the same week Trump was threatening to economically demolish America's closest ally and trading partner. Mark Carney, who just became prime minister, didn't just respond to Trump's threats. He didn't get defensive. He didn't beg. He went around him entirely. And what's absolutely delicious about this is that Trump's own advisors are now reportedly in full panic mode because they're realizing that Canada just secured economic partnerships that will make American tariffs essentially irrelevant. Canada doesn't need to fight Trump's tariff war. They just made themselves indispensable to Europe while America becomes isolated. Let me break down exactly how Carney outmaneuvered Trump so completely that historians are going to be studying this for decades. For months now, Trump has been obsessing over Canada. Obsessing. He's called it a state, he's threatened tariffs, he's insulted Canadian sovereignty at every turn. And his entire strategy has been based on this assumption that Canada needs the United States more than America needs Canada. That Canada would come crawling, begging for mercy, willing to accept whatever humiliating terms Trump demanded. Classic bully mentality, right? Except Trump forgot something crucial. Mark Carney isn't just some politician. This is the former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. This is someone who managed monetary policy during the 2008 financial crisis. This is someone who has relationships with every major economic power on the planet. Trump thought he was dealing with someone he could intimidate. He was actually dealing with someone who's forgotten more about international economics than Trump will ever know. So while Trump was doing his strongman routine, making threats, pounding his chest, Carney was quietly on the phone with Brussels, with Berlin, with Paris. He was in meetings with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. He was coordinating with European energy ministers who are absolutely desperate for reliable energy partners after the whole Russia disaster. And Trump had no idea. None. Here's what Canada just secured and why this is absolutely devastating for Trump's entire approach. The agreement establishes Canada as Europe's primary North American energy partner. We're talking liquefied natural gas, we're talking renewable energy technology, we're talking about the critical minerals that are essential for electric vehicle batteries and green technology. Europe needs these resources desperately. They've been trying to diversify away from Russian energy, and they need partners they can trust. And Canada just became that partner with a comprehensive framework that locks in long-term commitments. But it gets better. The deal also includes provisions that essentially create preferential trade status between Canada and EU member states that specifically protects against third-party tariff interference. Translation? Even if Trump slaps tariffs on Canadian goods, the EU agreement creates mechanisms to absorb those costs and maintain trade flows. Canada gets stability, Europe gets resources, and the United States gets left out in the cold. Trump wanted to use tariffs as leverage. Carney just made that leverage worthless. And the critical minerals component, that's the real knockout punch. Canada has massive reserves of lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements, all the materials that are crucial for the technology of the future. Trump's been trying to secure these for American companies. Carney just guaranteed they're going to Europe first. American tech companies are going to have to compete for access, and they're going to have to pay premium prices. Now, my sources are telling me that inside Trump's orbit right now, there is absolute chaos. Because his advisors are finally explaining to him what just happened. And he's realizing that his big, tough guy tariff threats actually accelerated Canada's pivot away from the United States. Think about the irony here. Trump's entire justification for threatening Canada was supposedly about protecting American interests, about making better deals, about American strength. And what did he actually accomplish? He pushed Canada into a partnership that makes America less relevant, that gives American companies less access to critical resources, and that demonstrates to the entire world that threatening your allies is a catastrophic strategy. European leaders are apparently thrilled. They've been watching Trump's chaos, his unreliability, his willingness to throw allies under the bus, and they've been desperate for stable partners. Carney just proved that Canada is that partner. Professional, reliable, strategic. There are reports that Trump tried to call Carney directly after the news broke, and Carney's office released a statement saying the Prime Minister was in meetings regarding Canada's international commitments and would respond to American inquiries through appropriate diplomatic channels. That's diplomatic speak for you don't get to bully your way into my calendar anymore. Here's what Carney understands that Trump fundamentally doesn't. Trade relationships in the modern world aren't just about raw numbers on a spreadsheet. They're about trust, stability, and long-term strategic alignment. Trump treats every relationship like a real estate deal, where you squeeze every dollar and then walk away. Carney understands that if you position yourself as the reliable partner while your competitor is chaotic and unpredictable, everyone wants to work with you. Canada's economy is roughly the size of Texas. It's not a superpower. But Carney just leveraged Canada's resources, its reputation, and its geographic position to secure partnerships that give Canada influence way beyond its size. Europe gets energy security and critical minerals. Canada gets economic diversification and protection against American economic warfare. And here's the beautiful part. This deal makes Canada more attractive to other partners too. Japan, South Korea, other Asian economies that are watching Trump's unpredictability, they're all going to be looking at Canada's European agreement and thinking about their own partnerships. Carney didn't just secure one deal. He created a model that other countries are going to want to replicate. The demand for Canadian partnerships is about to go through the roof, and all because Trump was so focused on threats and intimidation that he forgot other countries have options. Let's talk about the energy aspect specifically, because this is where Trump really miscalculated. Canada has the third largest oil reserves in the world, massive natural gas deposits, and hydroelectric capacity that's basically unmatched. Europe has been desperate for energy security since the Ukraine war exposed how dependent they were on Russia. Trump apparently thought he could use tariff threats to force Canada to give American companies better access to these resources at lower prices. Instead, Carney locked in long-term commitments with Europe at market rates with stable, predictable terms. Canadian energy companies now have guaranteed European buyers. European countries have guaranteed supply. And American companies, they're going to have to compete for whatever's left, and they're going to pay whatever price Canada wants to charge because Trump destroyed the leverage that comes from being a reliable, friendly partner. There are already reports that several major Canadian energy firms have signed preliminary agreements to build new LNG export facilities specifically designed to serve European markets. That's infrastructure investment, that's jobs, that's economic growth, all flowing from this partnership that Trump's threats accidentally created. But wait, there's more. The agreement also includes significant technology and innovation sharing provisions. Canada and the EU are creating joint research initiatives in green technology, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. They're establishing exchange programs for researchers and engineers. They're coordinating on technology standards and regulations. This is about building an integrated technology ecosystem that spans the Atlantic and excludes the United States. Canadian tech companies get access to European markets and European talent. European companies get access to Canadian innovation and North American markets through Canada, and American tech companies, they're on the outside looking in. They'll have to navigate two different regulatory systems, two different standards frameworks, without the insider access that comes from being part of the partnership. Trump spent his entire first term complaining about how Europe was treating American tech companies unfairly. Carney just gave Europe an alternative so they don't have to depend on American tech at all. Brilliant. Here's why this matters for regular people in Canada. Economic diversification means stability. When you're too dependent on one trading partner, that partner can threaten you, manipulate you, push you around. Canada's relationship with the United States has always had that vulnerability. Carney just reduced that vulnerability significantly. Canadian exporters now have guaranteed access to a market of 450 million Europeans. Canadian resource companies have long-term contracts that protect against market volatility. Canadian workers in energy, mining, technology, they all have more job security because their employers have more stable revenue streams. And if Trump does follow through on tariff threats, Canada has options now. The economic damage will be real, but it won't be catastrophic because Canadian companies have alternative markets already established. This is what competent leadership looks like. Not reactive, not defensive, but proactive and strategic. Building partnerships that make your country more resilient, more prosperous, more secure. Let's be honest about what this really represents. Trump got played. Completely, thoroughly, embarrassingly played. He thought he was the master deal maker, and he got outmaneuvered by a Canadian Prime Minister who's been in office for what, a few weeks? Trump's entire brand is built on this mythology, that he's the tough negotiator who always wins. And Carney just exposed that as fiction. Trump threatened, Carney acted. Trump talked, Carney delivered. Trump tried to isolate Canada, and Canada built new partnerships that isolate America. The international community is watching this, and they're learning. They're learning that Trump's threats are empty. They're learning that if you call his bluff and pursue alternatives, he has no follow-through. They're learning that the United States under Trump is unreliable, unpredictable, and ultimately ineffective. This is devastating for American credibility. Every ally Trump has threatened, every partner he's tried to bully, they're all watching Canada forge ahead with Europe, and they're all thinking about their own options. So where does this go from here? Well, Trump has a choice. He can double down, actually implement the tariffs he's threatened, and accelerate Canada's pivot toward Europe and other partners. Or he can back down, which would be an admission that his threats were meaningless and that he got outplayed. Either way, he loses. If he implements tariffs, American consumers pay higher prices, American companies lose access to Canadian resources and markets, and the U.S. economy takes damage while Canada's European partnerships cushion the blow. If he backs down, he looks weak, his threats lose credibility, and every other country knows they can ignore his bluster. Carney, meanwhile, is already reportedly in discussions with Asian economies about similar frameworks. Japan is interested, South Korea is interested. Even Australia has apparently reached out about coordinating approaches to trade diversification. Canada is building a network of partnerships that reduce North American dependence on the United States while increasing integration with the rest of the world. And it's all happening because Trump was so aggressive, so threatening, so unreliable that he pushed Canada to find alternatives. Here's what this tells us about the changing nature of global power. The United States has spent decades assuming that its economic size and military strength meant it could treat allies however it wanted, and they'd have no choice but to accept it. Trump has taken that assumption to its logical extreme. And what we're seeing is that assumption is wrong. Mid-sized, well-governed countries with valuable resources and smart leadership can build partnerships that give them independence from American pressure. Canada just proved it. Other countries are going to follow. The world order that emerges from this is going to be more multipolar, more networked, less dominated by Washington. And that's entirely because of Trump's approach to alliances. He's literally creating the exact opposite of what he claims to want. American isolationism used to mean America chose to step back from the world. Trump's version means America gets left behind while the rest of the world moves forward without us. You know what's interesting? Carney hasn't been gloating. He hasn't been doing press conferences celebrating this deal as a victory over Trump. His public statements have been measured, focused on the benefits for Canadians and Europeans, emphasizing partnership and mutual interest. That's strategic too. Because if Carney were to publicly frame this as defeating Trump, it would give Trump an excuse to make it personal, to escalate, to do something reckless just to save face. Instead, Carney is letting the deal speak for itself. He's letting the international community draw its own conclusions. He's letting Trump's advisors explain to their boss what just happened. It's a masterclass in strategic communication. Achieve your objectives, secure your victories, but don't humiliate your opponent so badly that they have to respond irrationally. Just quietly move forward while they're still figuring out what hit them. If you're watching from Canada, you need to understand what your Prime Minister just pulled off. Because your media might be covering this as just another trade deal, just another international agreement. But this is so much bigger than that. This is Canada declaring economic independence from American pressure. This is Canada positioning itself as a major player in the global economy of the future. This is Canada choosing partnership and reliability over submission to threats. And it worked. It actually worked. A country of 40 million people just outmaneuvered a country of 330 million and did it so smoothly that Trump didn't see it coming until it was done. You should be proud. This is competent government in action. This is what happens when you elect people who actually understand economics, diplomacy, and strategy instead of reality TV stars who think shouting is negotiating. Let me spell out specifically what resources Trump's approach just cost the United States preferred access to. Uranium for nuclear power, potash for agriculture, softwood lumber for construction, aluminum for manufacturing, rare earth elements for technology, natural gas for energy, and that's just the beginning. These are resources American industries need. They're resources American companies were counting on having reliable, affordable access to because of the integrated North American economy built over decades. Carney just made that access conditional instead of guaranteed. He created a system where Canada's first obligation is to European partners, and American companies have to compete for what's left. The economic cost to American industries is going to be significant. Prices will rise, supply chains will be disrupted. Companies will have to find alternative sources or pay premium prices to Canadian suppliers who no longer feel obligated to prioritize American buyers. All because Trump thought threatening a major ally was good strategy. Here's another angle that's not getting enough attention. This Canada-EU deal includes major climate and environmental cooperation, joint commitments to emissions reductions, technology sharing for renewable energy, coordinated approaches to carbon pricing. Canada and Europe are basically creating a green economy partnership that sets standards and creates markets, while the United States under Trump is still pretending climate change isn't real. This means Canadian companies developing green technology have guaranteed European markets. European companies have access to Canadian innovation. And American companies are excluded from the partnership that's going to define the industries of the future. 20 years from now, when electric vehicles are the norm and renewable energy dominates and carbon pricing is universal, the infrastructure for all of that is going to have been built by Canadian-European partnerships that were formed because Trump was too busy threatening people to notice the future passing him by. Mexico is watching this very carefully. So is South Korea. So is Japan. So is every country that Trump has threatened or bullied or insulted. They're all seeing that there's an alternative to accepting American pressure. They're seeing that if you have resources or markets or strategic position, you can build partnerships that protect you from American economic warfare. Canada just became the model for how mid-sized powers can maintain independence and prosperity in an era of American unreliability. Other countries are absolutely going to follow this playbook. Trump is creating a world where American influence shrinks, where American companies lose access to resources and markets, where American workers lose jobs because their government chose threats over partnership. And he's doing it while thinking he's winning. Here's what I think is really happening. Carney isn't just responding to Trump's immediate threats. He's positioning Canada for a world where the United States is no longer the reliable hegemon it was for 70 years. Whether Trump wins another term or not, the damage is done. The world has seen that American commitments aren't permanent, that American partnerships aren't reliable, that American leadership can change radically every 4 years. Carney is building relationships and agreements that will outlast Trump, that will protect Canada regardless of who's in the White House, that will give Canada options and influence for decades. This isn't a short-term tactical move. This is grand strategy. This is a fundamental reorientation of Canadian foreign and economic policy for the 21st century. And it's working. So here's where we are. Trump threatened Canada, thinking he could bully a smaller neighbor into submission. Carney responded by securing partnerships with Europe that make Canada more prosperous, more secure, and more independent. Trump wanted leverage. He got isolation. Trump wanted dominance. He got irrelevance. Trump wanted to make America great. He's making Canada greater instead. This is what happens when incompetence meets competence, when bluster meets strategy. When a bully meets someone who refuses to be bullied and has the skill to find another way forward, Canada just won. Not by fighting Trump's fight, but by refusing to play his game at all. By building something better while he was busy threatening and shouting. And the best part? This is just the beginning. The partnerships Carney is building, the framework he's establishing, this is the foundation for decades of Canadian prosperity and influence. Trump will be gone eventually. These agreements will remain. That's the difference between a deal maker and someone who actually understands how to build lasting value. That's the difference between Trump and Carney. And that's why Canada is going to be just fine, no matter what chaos comes from Washington. Thank you for watching.